Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Joan Sotkin is an author, a podcaster, and a very wise soul. Long before it was fashionable, she was into meditation and mind-body health. She understood the importance of following her inner guidance, and it led her to a most interesting life. Recently, Joan had sepsis, a serious infection that can be lethal. This brush with mortality caused her to reflect on a life well lived and to reassess her goals and desires for the future. Joan, it is so good to have you here on Bump in the Road. If you would, talk to us a little bit about some recent events in your life.
Well, if you'd like to know about the bump in the road, I had one very recently, like a couple of months ago, that has really shifted something major for me. I've been kind of going along, although I've had an odd couple of 3 years where I was trying to just kind of figure out who I want to be when I grow up. And I was going for my walk. I usually walk 1.5 to 2 miles every day. And I was walking with a friend and I suddenly said, I can't do this. I can't finish this walk. And I went home and realized that I really didn't feel good by the next morning. I had a number of symptoms, thought I had COVID. So I went for a COVID test. And of course, we don't get the results right away. So while I was waiting for the results, I started devolving in a way that I couldn't have imagined. I had chills, which was one of the symptoms I thought was COVID. So I was going into these periods of terrible chills, and I'd finally come out of it. And it got to the point where I couldn't make a decision. It was like I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was happening. One point, I woke up in the middle of the night and I was sitting next to my bed with my back against the bed and I couldn't stand up. And it was like, okay. So I just went back to sleep sitting next to the bed. Not my usual kind of behavior. And fortunately, my brother lives in Santa Fe and he could tell that something was seriously wrong and sent me to the hospital. And I went to the emergency room, and within a very short period of time, I was hooked up to a couple of IVs. I was in bad shape. I had sepsis. Now, fortunately, I didn't know how fatal sepsis can be, so I wasn't concerned. And I've been through enough physical stuff that I wasn't concerned, and I just kind of gave in. I'm not crazy about allopathic medicine, Western medicine, but I could see immediately that they were very good with crisis management.
Yes.
So I had this moment, and this was an amazing experience. I had this moment where I just totally surrendered to what was going on. Now, I can barely move my body. My mind isn't working. I'm definitely in an altered state. I wouldn't suggest this for getting into altered states, but I was definitely—
There are easier ways, right?
yes, and quicker ways. And I suddenly felt totally grateful for all the help I was getting. I was feeling very taken care of. And this energy of love just went through me. And I have no idea how long I stayed there. And I have very few memories of my time in the hospital. But 2 days later, they discharged me. And getting out of the hospital is like when people get out of jail, where they drop them on the street with a bus ticket, and you're on your own. It was like, okay, so then I started reading about sepsis and post-sepsis syndrome, and I definitely had symptoms. One of the odd things was my brother had listened to this radio show, local radio show in Santa Fe, and there was a practitioner on who talked about vitamin IVs, where they give you vitamin C and vitamin B. So he called the guy while I was in the hospital, wanted him to come to the hospital. The guy said, "No, we can't do that." and when I came out of the hospital, I went for 2 sessions over a 2-week period. And now it's not that long afterwards, and I'm feeling remarkably well. Sepsis can have long-term effects, and everybody says I dodged the bullet because I was in a pretty bad state. And the way I'm looking at that amazing experience, I say, when you knock on death's door and death doesn't let you in, something amazing happens internally, and you get to reassess subconsciously where you've been and where you want to go. And so since then, in the last month or so since I had this, I'm still processing it. I suddenly have this new commitment to my work and to my life, and I'm energized. I actually feel better than I did before the sepsis. So, as I said, I don't suggest you take that path, but it really worked for me.
That sense of love that you felt, do you
Yes.
carry that with you?
Yeah, well, I had been working on this for a long time. My goal is to realize the only reason someone is bad is because they're wounded. And so I try to lead with love and see what light I can find within a person that I can want to mirror back to me. I don't think that many people are essentially evil or bad. We just have a lot of wounded souls. And I'm interested in learning about that wound and how to help people past it.
You've had a very interesting journey yourself, in terms of your own health and evolution. I mean, it's really a remarkable story.
It's a long story. I actually wrote a book about part of it. In the 1970s, 76, I think it was, I gave away everything I owned. I had no money, had no idea where my life was going. I didn't see any solution other than giving everything away. Someone had been staying in my house. Now, this was 1976, and she had started channeling. Now, in 1976, that was a little early for anything that woo-woo, but I was ready to go there. And I started having these visions, and I was already meditating. I started meditating in 1972. And so I wound up giving everything I owned away. And I never knew where my food was coming from or where I'd be staying. And I realized, looking back at it now, that I was learning to just listen to that inner guidance. And I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew I had to do it. My parents thought I was totally nuts. My father stopped talking to me. My mother said, "Well, just call once a week so I know you're okay." So I did that. and that too turned out to be one of the best times of my life. It lasted a couple of years. But I learned so much about what I feel is how life works, that we don't have a good idea of how it works. And I was learning about the creative forces and how, and this was 1976, before all the new agey stuff was out. And so it was an amazing journey. I wrote a book about it called The Search for Connection. And it just covers that couple of years when I kept a day at a glance diary because I knew I was in the middle of a very interesting story. So when it came time to write it a couple of years ago, I could put the story back together again.
Well, it's interesting. We live in a world that encourages a linear life. You go to school, you go to grad school, you get the right job, you marry the right person, you have the house in the burbs with two kids, or well, however you want to tell the story. But life really is not linear, is it?
No, and I was brought up to believe that I should get married and have children. Uh, I should get a teaching degree so that I had something to fall back on in case I got divorced. Well, fortunately, I didn't get the teaching degree. I just went to summer school to get certified to teach because they were short of teachers. Did that for a year and decided that wasn't my idea of a good time. And and I got married, and then I got married again, and when I left the marriage, that's when I gave everything I owned away because I was told to get married and have children. And I saw that I couldn't possibly do that as my life.
No, it's funny. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was telling them a little bit about my path and how I just took off and traveled without knowing where I was going to go or what was going to happen or how it would turn out. I just didn't know. And they looked at me and they just couldn't imagine doing such a thing. And yet I would urge almost everybody to try something along these lines, maybe with some parental supervision. But I think getting out there and being in the flow and being present is game changing for your life.
But it's very hard to do. I mean, I can't, first of all, I had no kids. I had no responsibility other than myself.
Mhm.
And I'm still in that position because I chose not to get married, not to have children. And so I live this very strange life. And the focus of my life, even though I teach about money and I've made a lot of money in my lifetime, I really have seen that money doesn't fix anything, and that I learned more about myself in the world when I had none than when I was making a lot. So my goal is not about making money. I now know after that journey that I'm going to survive. As long as I'm not dead, I'm going to survive. And to trust, I truly believe to the depth of my soul that whatever we're going through is what we need to become who we're becoming. Had I not gone through every single part of my journey with all the sickness and the difficulty, the emotional difficulties, I couldn't be doing the work I'm doing today. And I can do this work where I work with other people, helping them find their place of peace within. I do it on a very deep level, and it allows me to feel enriched in my life, because in order to do the work, I have to be able to connect to you on a deep level. And that's my search, is that search for feeling connected. And I think we do that through our emotions.
I agree, and I think that that energy that comes from connection is more valuable than all the money in the world, and it leads you to much more interesting places, both within yourself and with others.
Yes, and I think so many of us were deprived of touch, that babies need touch. They don't need to be swaddled in the where they put all the babies with a bottle in its mouth. That's not what a baby needs. A baby needs touch. In the primitive societies, they put the babies on their back and they have them with them all day long, and we're missing that. And when I see today, I do a lot of networking, and it's so easy to have, let's get together and have a conversation. Okay, we have a conversation. And because there are so many people to connect to, you wind up having these surface conversations. Someone has to say, let's continue this and make the appointment to talk again. Otherwise, you're just going through meeting a lot of people, and your life is missing depth. To me, the depth comes from people, and from getting to know others and relationships. And people are always looking for more money. Well, money is about relationships, because there's no such thing as, money doesn't just fly in the window. It comes from people. So in order to deal well with money, you have to know how to deal with relationships.
I think people are missing a great deal of depth of soul in this modern life that we live. But I think part of connecting with others, the way you're talking about, is also connecting with yourself
Hmm.
and knowing your foibles, knowing your wounds, as you were talking about earlier, because through those, we can really connect with others.
Right. And what I've learned how to do is, first of all, I had to learn how to not take anything personally and not to compare myself to anyone. And it takes time to go through that process. So when I reach out to someone and they don't get back to me, I don't think there's something wrong with me or that they don't like me. They just didn't connect. So it's a matter of getting, I've developed what I call empathetic detachment. And I think that with what's going on in the world today with the COVID and everything, is that people are feeling disconnected and stressed out and unsafe. And to me, if you can watch the drama and not take the drama personally, but to be able to watch it and have empathy for what's going on, but not have to fix it, and not feel, and this is what the giving away did, and I think you had that same effect, is that you trust more that you're going to make it.
And I think every circumstance has something to teach you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I mean,
Uh,
I've come to see life as a road trip. It sounds corny, but truly I have. And that there are twists and turns and bumps and everything else. And every single one of them, in every single one of them, is a lesson.
yes, and I've probably learned more from the multiple bumps than, you know, uh, two divorces. I learned about relationship, and I was able to see how I was recreating my home situation, and everything. If you understand, first of all, I don't believe we come here to have a good time. I think we come here to learn. And what part of the learning, a good part of the learning, is about emotions. And I've come to see that emotions are the creative force behind our life stories. And once you understand that, then you can see that things aren't good or bad. They just are. And what can I learn from this particular story? But when
And how can I choose to react?
Absolutely, and that's the learning. What do I choose? What do I choose to feel, and how do I choose to react? And for me, deciding to learn acceptance and satisfaction were the two most important things I taught myself.
Why satisfaction?
Because we have this dopamine thing in our brains that tells us that we always need more. And it's a survival thing, because to keep us eating and to keep us procreating. Well, we don't have to worry about that anymore. And we've gotten into this maelstrom of desire, and usually for more money, because money's about relationships. If you have really great relationships, you don't crave as much money. It's funny how that works. And so if you can learn to be satisfied, and people are afraid to feel satisfied with what they have, because they think that if they're satisfied, they'll never have any more than they already have. But it's impossible not to have more. We live in an expanding universe, and if you let go, more is going to come. I mean, that's part of our system. And it's that desire, that needing more, that longing for more money, more food, more attention, more love. That longing becomes a habit, and it makes it impossible to be satisfied with what you have in the moment.
Do you think meditation helps center you in the moment more and remove you from some of these longings?
It helps, absolutely. I've been meditating so long that it's hard to separate from before, because I've been meditating longer than I didn't meditate. So, I was in my early 30s when I started meditating. And I think anything that allows you to gain knowledge of yourself, where your focus is not always what other people have and what I don't have, but where the focus becomes, who am I? Who do I want to become? And what do I have to do to get there? I don't set goals, the SMART goals, exactly what you want, when do you want it? I like to set feeling goals.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
and for me, my main goal was to not let money determine how I feel and to not worry about anything. That was my goal. And I believe that when I set an intention rather than just a goal, that what I need to achieve that goal shows up. It usually takes longer than I would like it to, but it happens. So it took me a long time. And all of these things that happened to me and the physical stuff, I mean, I have a genetic disorder. I still believe that with epigenetics, I can change it, but we haven't gotten to there yet. I've done some of the changing, but I have a connective tissue disorder, which causes very specific long-term physical effects. Well, I had to learn to be satisfied. I had to learn to be okay with that. And so I saw and I didn't find out till I was 65 that this was the problem. And learning to live with the disability and at the same time to figure out how to make my life work within my parameters. That's been very important in my life, to be, this is who I am. And I always believe that you can heal I think we're just learning how to do it, but to be okay with who I am and where I am and everything in my life in the moment. And that opens up the space for new things to come in.
And that goes back to acceptance.
Yes, and that's what I had in the hospital with that very strange episode. I was, even though I don't normally trust the allopathic system, because that's one of the reasons I got as sick as I did, but it was like, okay, if this is where I am, how can I make the most of it? How can I just be present and trust that I will be taken care of? People say, well, God, I trust in God. That's putting it outside of yourself. And, I've had to think a lot about what is that. And I believe that we have the creative power within us. And we just have to learn how to get there. They say the kingdom of God is within you. Well, what does that mean? If that's within you, then you have that power. And whatever story you're in the middle of, it's just a story. And whether it's cancer or Ehlers-Danlos, which is what I have, or whatever physical thing you've been given to work with, it's not good or bad. It's just what it is. What can you learn from it?
And I agree, it is a story. And I often think, tell 3 stories about your circumstance, and all of a sudden you'll realize what is reality.
And it's, today in this very divided world we live in, it's amazing how people can believe such different things about what is true and what is not true. The whole thing with mask wearing. I mean, it's crazy what's going on now. And what matters is your relationship with yourself. Because if you don't have that relationship with yourself, it can't work with other people.
Yeah, I think so. If you could give anybody some advice as they face their own bump in the road, what two or three pieces I can't talk today. What two or three pieces of advice would you pass along?
Well, to me, it starts with love yourself. Then is let go. Love yourself, let go, and connect. Those are the three things that I think are most important. Love yourself, let go, and connect.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life. Bump in the Road is a production of Cancer Road Trip. Subscribe to the podcast, follow us on social media at Cancer Road Trip, and you can learn more at www.cancerroadtrip.com. Until next time, be safe and be well.